Hey, what's going on, guys? Mike Patrick, and in this video I want to talk about diabetes, and I want to talk about pre-diabetes and how we can get a grip on diabetes, since it is such a epidemic in our current society. Okay, and this is how we can get a grip on our diabetes if we have them, and also our children, because we know it's really prevalent in young children today. Okay, now we know diabetes is one of two things. Okay, either your body is not producing enough insulin, okay, to be able to deal with the excess glucose in your body, or okay, your cells is not responding to the insulin in order to metabolize the extra glucose in your body, or the glucose in your body, period. Okay, so your cells are insulin resistant, and so therefore let's look at insulin as a key. Okay, and when it gets to your cells, it's going to unlock your cells. Your cells are locked, and it unlocks the cells, open the cells up to drive that glucose into your cells, so your cells can utilize the glucose as energy. Okay, and so when you're insulin resistant, okay, that's not happening, which leaves a lot of extra glucose in the blood, which end up giving us a whole lot of complications. Okay, and or like I said, you don't have enough insulin to assimilate the excess glucose that's in your system, which leaves you hyperglycemic. Okay, with a bunch of extra sugar in your system. Now, why is this so prevalent now as opposed to any other time in history, right? It's because, guys, we have to look at it this way. From an evolutionary standpoint, we are not that different from, say, our ancestors from 2,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago. From an evolutionary standpoint, from a big scheme of things, this is no time. Okay, and so while certain changes are beginning to happen now, okay, for the most part, most of us are walking around with the same genetics that our ancestors had 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago. Okay, and the thing is, back then, their body, what you think would have happened to them if they would have ate, if constantly they would have been eating things like Doritos, candy bars, okay, a lot of processed packaged food, okay? they would have had the same issues, probably a lot worse. We probably adapted a little better than them, being the time has gone on, but they would have had it really bad, right? So the thing about it, guys, we have the same genetics. We have to eat the way that our genetics, call for us to eat, okay? For us to be healthy, because any dis-ease is just your body trying to tell you that something isn't right. There's an imbalance there. You're not in homeostasis, and therefore this is a response to get you to try to get something right. Okay, and so that's why I say, look at it this way. Our ancestors, they ate what was necessary. They ate to live. They didn't have the ability to go to a grocery store and get excess foods and to eat more than what their body needed. Okay, so when they ate a carbohydrate, their body, everything was in homeostasis. Their body was able to utilize the glucose in their system based on the fact that it was not excess glucose in their system from overeating too many carbohydrates. Okay, the carbohydrates, they ate it formed glucose and formed it to sugar in their system. They insulin utilized the sugar, and took it to the cells, and it was used as energy. Okay, it was used as energy efficiently. Okay, they didn't have an excess of glucose in their system because they didn't have an excess of foods and processed foods. Okay, that put too much glucose and extra sugar in their body. So that's one thing. Okay, so that's when type 1 diabetes is why that's so prevalent, because your body's just not producing enough insulin to take care of all this excess sugar. We're just eating way too much. Okay, and then when we eat way too much, we're eating way too much processed sugars. Okay, now too, with it being processed, okay, so with it being synthetic, unnatural, okay, this is where type 2 comes into play, where your cells are locking up and staying locked up because it's not responding to your insulin, because that's like, look at your cells. Your cells are intelligent. So imagine if somebody try to bring you something that you know is going to harm you, you're going to reject it. So what happens is, over time, guys, as our cells is taking in all this processed, unnatural sugar, okay, form of sugars, it begins to just lock up and say, I don't want that. That's not natural. I'm gonna reject that, okay? And so the insulin is not being able to unlock the cell, so therefore you can't drive this glucose into your cells and utilize it as energy. And if that's not happening, all that extra sugar is just being backed up in your bloodstream, and it's staying there in your bloodstream, okay? So what has to happen also is, not only are we eating too much carbohydrates, so we have an excess sugar in our body, you know what I mean, from being pretty like gluttons, okay? And the thing is, like I said, but also the unnatural sugars. So we have to get back to natural sugars, okay? Low glycemic sugars as you're trying to make that process. So use sweeteners like honey, okay, and things like that, agave nectar, you know, stevia, okay, things like that, natural sugars, not these some of these artificial sweeteners, but actual real natural sugars that you can get out in nature, okay, to have a low glycemic index, okay? And then therefore, you know, we can start getting a grip on your cells recognizing the glucose as natural and something to utilize as energy, okay? So that's how over time we can deal with insulin resistance, okay? And then, because it's basically not the insulin that your system or your cells is resisting, it's the unnatural sugar and glucose that the insulin is bringing to your cells, okay? And then also, like I said, so that's what's happening with the children. The children are eating so much processed, packaged carbohydrates, okay, and that's why they're developing diabetes at an early age, okay, and pre-diabetes and things of that nature. So we have to stop overeating, for one, exercise, so we do spike our metabolism, okay, and then when we eat, we have to eat natural sugars, okay, natural foods that's closest to what you would have ate 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago, and your ancestors, because genetically you're not much different from them, okay? And if they wouldn't have been able to handle it now, you still can't handle it. If they wouldn't have been able to handle it then, you can't handle it now without breaking your body down, okay? And also, that's why I look into ketosis, okay? Ketosis is, with a ketogenic diet, that's when you use your you use fat as a form of energy, okay, as opposed to glucose, okay? You can use fat as a form of energy as well, and that's likely what most of our ancestors did, because they didn't have all the excess sugars, like I said, all the excess carbohydrates that we have. So they was likely to be eating more fat all the time. If they hunted an animal, okay, that's fat, that's protein, okay? Now protein is you don't form as much glucose with protein, and then with fat there's no glucose at all, okay? So it doesn't spike these two things. Protein doesn't spike your blood sugar as much as carbohydrates, and then fats doesn't really spike it at all, okay? So so look into a keto diet and switching over to a ketogenic diet, and it takes a bit of time to get into ketosis, okay, for your body to recognize that fat as fuel as opposed to carbohydrates, okay? And then even when we did eat carbs, it was more like natural plant food, okay? So it was a different type of carbohydrate, a different type of sugar, okay? And even if it was plant food, it wasn't necessarily fruit. It could have just been different greens and things like that that don't have much natural sugar in it, you know, and it's very low glycemic once those carbs do turn into sugar. So it's just different. You see what I mean? So hopefully this was a helpful video, guys, a different way for you to look at diabetes, so therefore you can get a grip on it, okay, and we can start turning our health around and our children's health, okay? Thank you. Have a good one.